Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. Happy Thursday morning to you. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We're in the midst of, actually kind of closing down, of offering a few thoughts in response to a whole bunch of emails that I had gotten and private Facebook messages asking me to comment on 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 11. You may have surmised by now that I absolutely love 1 Corinthians 10 verse 11. It is such a powerful, powerful text. Okay, in verse 6 and in verse 11, Paul looks back on many events of Israel's history, and he says they, both the people and the events evidently, they were types of us. As Richard Hayes and a number of scholars point out, the literal Greek of the text is that they were types. It does not really say these things happen as examples for us. No, it says those events, pardon me, those events, and evidently the people as well, were types of us, of what was happening in the first century. And folks, this is a really, really critical point. Do you realize that the ancient Jewish rabbis believed that their ancient history did in fact point forward to the last days events? They had statements such as it was in the first Exodus, so it shall be in the second. As it was in the days of Moses, so shall it be in days of Messiah. They understood that the old covenant practices, the old covenant realities, the old covenant events, and even the people foreshadowed were typological of the last days events. It is therefore incredibly significant when Paul looks back on those old covenant events and people and says they were types of us. Now, what is a type? What is a shadow? Well, we understand what a shadow is, I think. It points to a reality. It is not the reality. You know, my dispensational friends tell me and tell us that Israel herself, to use the words of Dwight Pentecost, Israel, Old Covenant Israel, is the determinative goal of God's scheme of redemption. That is simply not true. Old Covenant Israel was the type. She was the shadow. Pardon me. What did the shadow point forward to? Better things to come. Notice what Paul says in Colossians 2, 14 to 16. He was writing to and about Gentiles who are being coerced almost into obeying the law of Moses in order to be saved. Acts 15, 1 and 2. One of those pressing issues was circumcision. And Paul says in Colossians chapter 2, you were circumcised, but it was the circumcision not made with hands. It was the circumcision of the heart in putting off the body of the flesh, not physical flesh, all right? The works of the flesh. And then in verses 14 to 16, he says, do not let any man judge you in respect of new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, which are a shadow, by the way, he uses present active indicative, which are a shadow of the good things about to come. So look at what Paul says. Israel's entire cultic world, that included the temple, that included the city, that included the land itself. They are, Paul says, when he wrote, a shadow of good things that are about to come. So the shadows, the types, were not the goal. They were not the destiny. They pointed to something better. And thus, when our dispensational friends say, oh, we're looking for the restoration of the temple. No, the temple was a shadow. When they tell us we're looking for the restoration of the animal sacrifices. No, the animal sacrifices were shadows of the real sacrifice, the perfect sacrifice of Jesus Christ. You see, when we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and Paul says the goal of the previous ages? Well, in the previous ages, those things were types and shadows. As Paul says, they were types of us. Paul is therefore pointing out that that which was typified, that which was foreshadowed by Old Covenant Israel's practices, was now coming to its reality. And folks, when the reality comes, you don't need the shadows. Hey guys, which would you rather hug? The shadow of your wife or your wife? And listen, this brings up another issue. Futurists tell us, well, yes, the church is the fulfillment of Christ, of the Old Testament types, and the spiritual things of Christ. As Joel McDermott argued in my debate with him in 2012, he said, yes, the Old Testament foreshadowed Christ, and now we're looking for the full reality. That the things of Christ in reality foreshadow the reality that will come at the second coming. No, folks. That is absolutely false, as I proved in that debate. The whole point here is when Paul says they were types of us, they were pointing toward the goal, they were pointing toward the reality, and then Paul says the goal, the destiny, is come upon us. That falsifies any concept of a future reality. It falsifies any idea that the church is a type or a shadow of any greater reality. You know, I wrote a book on this very issue entitled AD 70, A Shadow of the Real End, ? To answer the claim that, well, yes, AD 70 was a resurrection, but it foreshadows the real one. It was the coming of the Lord, but it foreshadows the real one. AD 70 was the end of the age, but it points forward, it typifies the real end of the age. No such thing. That is a totally unbiblical view. And Paul's statement in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, the end, the goal of the ages has come upon us, is definitive proof of that. I have an in-depth discussion of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 in this book. Go to my website, eschatology.org, BibleProphecy.com, order the book, AD 70, A Shadow of the Real End, ? Make a note, include a note that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. Hey, thanks so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. You have a fantastic weekend. We hope to see you on Monday.